Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm your host, Patty Farmer, and I am looking forward to sharing today's industry expert with you. And I am really excited about our expert today because I love animals. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. You may be thinking, what does marketing, media, and money have with an animal? And you're going to find out. So let me tell you a little bit about her. So Gina Yarrish is a businesswoman ahead of the curve, who's always identified and capitalized on business opportunities from a 30-year career leading her $1 million real estate business to where she is today, a leading coach in mind training. She has spent the past 2 decades studying human behavior, stress and anxiety, and linking it with her love for horses. She's a speaker, author, and the founder and CEO of Yarcort, a state-of-the-art coaching facility and creator of the game-changing experiential learning system that leads to aligning your head, heart, and gut. Gina is the world's leading expert on regulating stress and anxiety by design. Gina believes peace, happiness, and health comes from within, and unless you're conditioning your thinking, then you get what life offers instead of what you deserve. So controlling your inner thoughts and outward action gives life balance and happiness. And I'm really excited to talk about that. So thank you so much for being here with me today, Gina.
Well, thank you, Patty. It's great to be here today. That was an awesome introduction.
Thanks. I really want everybody to kind of really get a good sense of who we're talking to. And so I think that today we're really going to talk about some great stuff. I feel like in the world right now, a lot of stress and anxiety, right? And I really feel like really working on those things. And I love what you really said about work-life balance. But I also know that you have a story. And I know that no matter what we do that we love, we always had an aha moment. Something happened in our life that really kind of changed the trajectory of our life and put us on the path to where we're really living our purpose. And so I know that you have a story. So why don't you share a little bit of your story with my audience?
Well, I started out, I'll try to keep it brief. I started out being born in an unwed mother's home back in the 60s, Patty. And I've received many blessings in life, even though I didn't realize them at the time. But the initial blessing was being adopted into a wonderful, large Italian family. And I have to tell you, I did everything to kind of screw that up, right? And then journey led me into business, and the family business was real estate and insurance. Well, my patterns and habits of what I had learned through generations was that it was this belief system of, in order to get somewhere in life, you have to work really hard, long, and put yourself out everywhere. So, between being a mom, a wife, an entrepreneur, a daughter, I sat on economic development, board of realtors, business associations. I was always, when you're a leader, you're always in the top of the game positions. And so you're always available for lots of different organizations. So if it wasn't business, it was PTA, traveling soccer, all of those things. When I was about 35 years old, there came a point in my life when I went to put my head down on the pillow, which often I never slept because my mind was always working on all the things that I had forgotten to do the day before. I felt as if I had about 1,000 pounds that hit my chest, and a million thoughts go through your mind that never before you would have thought of. And the scary thing, Patty, that when I ended up in the hospital having that heart catheterization, the doctor came out and he said to my husband and I, there's good news and there's the bad news. And so the good news is that there's nothing wrong with your wife. And the other thing he said was, the bad news is it's in her head. And so this young, sassy girl, when I first heard that, I was very defensive because I thought there was something mentally wrong with me. But what he was trying to tell me was it was my belief system, my thinking system of how I showed up and who I needed to be that was creating the results. So I was doing it to myself. And so often we hear from people that say they can't find anything wrong with someone. And that was one of those moments where they didn't find anything wrong with me, but it was in my way of thinking. So my husband and I decided, we took the biggest risk that we had ever taken, and I'm a big risk taker. We decided to relocate from New Jersey to Pennsylvania. And I've always dreamed about having horses. And so I decided to get a horse. And my big aha moment when I was studying natural horsemanship was that when I was playing with my horse, I couldn't understand why 9 out of 10 times I would see his belly button, because the external part of me seemed like I had my stuff together. But what the horse was showing me was that my internal stuff was a mess. And so I was so stressed internally that it wasn't anything that I had to do outside of myself. What I had to do was, the work that I had to do was all on the inside of myself. And my horse took me on that journey. I was working with him for about 4 weeks when I realized I had stopped taking my medicine. I felt fine. It was a remarkable experience for me because being adopted, I've always had this belief something that no one's ever going to help me. I can only help myself, which is okay. But here I had not a 2-legged creature, but more of a 4-legged creature that didn't express anything through words, but rather through body language that helped me heal remarkably from where I am today.
Wow, that is a great story. And I can really see how that would really do it for you, right? Because we don't really know. And then sometimes we just have that wake-up call that really changes something, either in our thinking or, sometimes it happens to people and physically now they have to make a change, right? But I'm really glad that you're here with us, and I'm really glad that you did that. So that's really awesome. If you could go back now, so based on that, if you could go back and talk to your, let's just say 25-year-old self, what would you tell yourself to do first?
Stop worrying about what other people are thinking and saying, and do what you know how to do.
Oh, I love that. I think one of the things I learned early on, took me a while though, but one of the things I learned early on is that to listen to my gut. And I'm going to tell you, I didn't always listen. Like I was aware, like it was talking to me, right? I didn't always listen. And I can tell you that pretty much looking back, every time it did and I chose not to listen, boy, did it let me know. And it came back, right? And I thought, when am I going to learn to just listen? Now I have to say, when it tells me to do something, about, I would say 85 to 90% of the time, I listen. When it tells me not to do something, though, 100% of the time I listen. So I think that we kind of have to do that. But one of the things I have to tell you of reading that bio, one of the things that really stood out, like it was in bold for me, was a leading coach in mind training. Now I have to tell you, like for all the things that I do, right? A leading coach in mind training, because I think that is amazing. Like what a great thing to be able to do. So that in itself made me want to just go and like, this would just be so great to have her be on the podcast. And so I kind of delved deep into your website and your blog, and I just literally didn't quite stalk you, but I read every single thing that I could find to really be able to talk about that. Because, studying human behavior, stress, and anxiety, I mean, that is pretty impressive. But then linking it to your love for horses. So I love that. And one of the things that I found when I did that was that you actually have this system, I guess would be what I would say. So your number one tool, like you say, is a focus forward technique. And I thought just those words, focus forward technique, and that it was your number one tool to the simple solution to stress and anxiety. And I got to tell you, there's times that I get stressed and anxious. I try to be one of those people who keep that to a minimum. But there's things happening in my life and business that do. I have 6 daughters, so there's no way you have that many girls and you don't have some drama, right? But so tell me a little bit about that. I mean, what is that focus forward technique? I love it.
Yeah, so Patty, what we find is that there's only two ways of thinking, right? It's either forwards or backwards. It's either uplifting or draining. It's either positive or negative. No matter what word opposites that we use, it's all the same. And stress happens because we get caught in the past or in the current situation, and our mind is not conditioned to think from what we want to create. When we often talk to people, they'll come in and they'll say, "Well, if you rate your stress on a scale of 1 to 10, people are like, I'm at 100." And, we said, well, where are you going in life? What are the things that you want to create? What does time, money, freedom look like for you? What does your career look like for you? And they're like, well, I don't know. I never thought about that. And so everything about the focus forward technique is to condition their mind to think from where they want to get to. And then learning how to become more solution oriented and reverse engineer. We don't need to know all the steps. It's kind of like if you think about getting in the car and going to the supermarket, you know exactly where you need to go. And sometimes you're going to hit the divots on the side because you're not paying attention. Well, when you're focusing forward in your life, the supermarket is that end destination. What is that for you? And it becomes very easy to steer the car in a direction rather than constantly just living one day at a time. As so most people either live one day at a time or they live 30 days at a time, but even getting people to think beyond 12 months is a bit of a challenge. And as soon as they know where they're going, all of a sudden the pressures of stress seem to subside, and they don't need to have all of the answers, rather just 1 or 2 steps, because once we take the 1 or 2 steps, the other steps begin to show up. And it's kind of like being on top of the perfect wave that's just going to like glide you into the sand.
I love that. I also noticed that around that, you actually have a book, Harness Your Purpose, Power, and Peace, Discover the Leader Within You. And one of the things that when I was looking through the book, I really noticed that it kept talking about these easy to follow steps to discover your own purpose, power, and peace. And I have to tell you, first of all, I love P words. So, and if anybody looks at my website, they know that I do. So purpose, power, and peace. I really love that. So it said easy to follow steps. So could you share with us like a few of those steps?
Yeah, so just like we were talking about the focus forward technique, right? Regardless of where you're at right now, you can look at life and say, I can validate, this is what I'm experiencing, this is where I'm at, these are the frustrations that I'm having. And so if not this, then if you could open your mind to the possibility of expanding and having anything that it is that you want, to the point that we always say, it's not just go bigger, but we want the butterflies to fly in our stomach, because we're not stretching unless we're taking that little bit of uncomfortable feeling. And so if you can just think beyond what could be, all of a sudden something like lights up on fire inside of you. And there's a inspiration, motivation that begins to happen. So first, it's taking the time really to think about what is it that you want to create in life. In the situations where people are always struggling financially, they're always looking at limitation and always looking to cut back. Well, if you're always cutting back, well, then how are you going to get forward? So the opposite of that would be, well, what if you had enough money? How much money would you have, and what would you be doing to get it? People go, I don't know. Well, that's what they need to figure out first. It's so simple. Their simplicity is beyond simple, but it's so hard for humans to think in that direction.
I think that makes sense. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is that you talk about blurred boundaries. Now, I understand boundaries so well. And I think it's really important to have them, not just in your life, but in your business as well. But I do understand that sometimes they do get blurry, right? But I think this was really interesting when you were talking about identifying the blurred boundaries that get in our way. Do you find that most people have like the same, like 3 to 5, and they just kind of come up over and over? And do you think that as a general rule, let's just say women, right, or men or whatever, do they seem to have like the same ones? Are there like a certain amount that we just seem like we all tend to just have the same ones that we do over and over again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's the number one thing always comes back to our own personal judgment. There's that boundary. There's 2 things. The blurred boundary is that we're judging ourselves, and so then we end up limiting ourselves. Or on the external side of giving, it's we want to be liked, loved, appreciated, respected, and cared for. And sometimes that blurred boundary comes because we'll become more of a giver. And then, of course, you know what happens.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's really good. And I think that Your program that you use, one of the reasons it's so powerful is that it's a little bit different than what most people think of when you're thinking about using your brain. Tell us a little bit about what makes this program different.
Yeah, so a lot of people, when they think about horses, they think about riding or therapy, things like that. For us, it's more about the horse becomes the teacher. And the powerful part of it is that we create the metaphors that are similar to live experiences so people can learn. But when they're interacting with the horse on the ground, it's the nonverbal communication that forces them to think. And so when we're out in the world and we're talking to people or having other coaching programs, you're going to get feedback based on other people's opinion. We believe that it doesn't matter what other people think or other people's opinion. The most important is your opinion and what matters to you. And so the only way that we can bring that clarity is through nonverbal communication. And of course, once we do the activity, maybe I can give you a metaphor so that people can get a picture. Would that be okay?
Perfect.
All right. So if we're a businesswoman, right, and we're in the business field and we hit this plateau and we feel like we go back to what we know how to do. And so then we start working longer and harder. And we do this activity with horses where we bring in 3 different horses, and each horse you have to identify their characteristics. And they may identify, strong, extroverted, talented, pushy, snobby, whatever the different characteristics they identify with. Well, you can't get to where you want to be unless you're the person that you need to be to get there. And so in order to break through those ceilings, if you're in the bracket of making $100,000 a year, you have these characteristics and these strengths and these beliefs. But if you want to be a leader in an organization or you want to be making $1 million in your company, what type of characteristics do the person need to have? And so through that simple activity of really, that's just an observation activity that we do, people realize that, they may put shy, timid, introverted. And so how are those qualities going to get you to where you want to go? So it's not anything that we tell them, but it's through their own discovery that they learn about themselves and then realize what it is that they need to think, their thoughts, behaviors, and attitudes, how they have to change to become that person that they want to be.
Oh, I love that. So what are some of the changes specifically that business owners, in your opinion, need to make to be successful in today's business environment?
Make a decision of where they're going. People are very indecisive. Maybe, coulda, shoulda, can I, maybe, am I? There's all these different doubts and thoughts, and they start heading off on a path and then they're very undecisive.
I think that's really true. And I think that before you can really make a change, you really have to acknowledge, right, what is. And I think a lot of times people really struggle with that. And so I think that is really important. Like, there are steps, and sometimes the steps need to be taken in a certain way, in a certain order for them to really be more successful. Like, you might have a little bit of success, but sometimes just knowing what order to do things and moving forward and making a decision, because sometimes you make the decision, but then you have to back that decision up with action. Right? So just the decision itself isn't enough. You have to have action. And in the business world, where so much business is about sales, right, and building relationships, which to me is the most important thing and the way that I have built my business, but still sales do have to be made. So I think that a lot of times some of these things, in order to have both strategic growth and achieve work-life balance, it's kind of a tough balancing act. But I think that when you have some of these things together and you do identify those blurred boundaries, it is easier then to design a life that will help you, right, reach your potential and really be powerful in helping to propel you to move forward.
Well, when you know where you're going, it becomes very easier to make decisions that would be productive in that direction versus being busy.
Absolutely. So what do you do best in your business? Like, what do you love about what you do the most?
What I love is just working with people, whether we're doing it online or we're, at a workshop or people are coming to the arena here. And I think the biggest thing that just fills my soul is the aha moments that they have. And it's not, it's just the situations and the settings that we create for them to be in a learning environment, to be open to learning, which is really cool.
Absolutely. That is very, very cool. So what would you say is the number one reason why sales agencies lose sales, and how can they change that?
Yeah, I think the number one reason why agents lose sales is because they make the selling all about themselves instead of understanding the client's needs. So as a perfect example, if you were to take the insurance industry, sales agents, producers, brokers, whichever it may be, go out to make a sale, but they forget that their benefit behind making the sale is to protect their clients from any type of financial loss. And so when they come from a different state of mind, is I'm here to help them, protect them from any type of loss, versus I need to sell a policy, there's two different mindsets. And before you even walk in the door, we all do this, we're all guilty of this, we prejudge them based on their body language. People may dress a certain way and they may be able to talk a certain way, but they don't consider what their body language is saying before they even open their mouths.
Well, that would certainly activate a new way to think and awareness.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about salespeople in, like, say, just the car industry. You walk into a car place and a gentleman comes rushing up to you. Your first thought is, oh my God, he's going to try and sell me something. I don't want nothing.
And but why are you there at the sale at the you're not thinking about buying a car, right?
Right. But if someone came up to you and said, and asked you a question more along the line of, are you looking for a new car? I mean, it sounds obvious, but the most obvious things are the simplest things that can start a conversation that's, non-defensive.
Absolutely. So, Gina, what would you say is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Work on yourself.
Oh, that's a good one, right? Easier said than done, but it is, right? Because you really can't serve anybody else if your pitcher's empty. You got to be refilling that pitcher, and self-care is not selfish.
Yeah. It's interesting. For so many years, you're busy working and being involved in so many different things that you're trying to make a difference in the world by pushing things out there. But when you start to make a difference in yourself, more people join the force quicker and want to do what it is that you're doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's just it's a perception, how we're either working outward or we're working inward. And the greatest thing that someone ever said to me was once I started studying natural horsemanship, personal development, the more you can develop yourself, the more knowledge, the more awareness, the more growth you'll have.
Absolutely. 100%. I love that. I think that is something that people really sometimes don't get. I think you're right. Sometimes the most simple things, we kind of take them for granted, right? We learned them early on and we don't keep working on those skill sets, right? And we kind of fall back onto other skills maybe we had and we forget. And I think that, continual personal development and business development is very, very important. Personally, I read like 3 personal development or business development books a week. And the only time I read, not to say that there's anything wrong if other people do it, but for me, when I fly, which is a lot as a speaker, when I fly, I give myself permission on a plane to be able to read like fiction, right? And I have a favorite author. But other than that, I actually really, really love reading personal development and business development books. I just like learning, right? And so I think that for me as a strategist, it's so interesting to read something and be able to see a different perspective. So I always love hearing other perspectives of how people think. There's always something to learn, and then there's always something to apply if you're willing to activate new thinking. And just happen to be one of those people, but I know that it wasn't something that comes naturally always. It's something that I think for me was a decision that I made. But since then, now it actually comes to me a whole lot easier than it did when I was younger, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love reading. I'm an avid learner. Learning is really great. I think key, though, is, taking the knowledge that you have and applying it somewhere, having the experiential experience to grow, because you can get people that are extremely intelligent and smart, but they don't know how to do anything.
Well, that is so true. I think a lot of times people don't think about the implementation. I know that for me, I'm an educator. So like when I'm speaking somewhere, one of the things I love is when people tell me that they got so excited that on break, they went and called their VA and said, we're going to do this tomorrow, like start working on this. I really love that. It's not really about motivating somebody. It's, for me, it is really like motivating somebody to implement something and take action. So I really think that is important.
Mm-hmm.
So Gina, what's next for you? What project are you working on? Do you have anything new you're working on, or something that's coming up that you're going to be working on next?
Well, I mean, we're always working on alliances, based on the times that we're facing. We're looking at developing different programs. We actually just did a beta test. We had 2 sessions where we pre-recorded the horse activities and brought them online to see if people could have the same, a similar experience as being in the arena. And granted, the reflective activities went really, really well, and we had huge breakthroughs. So we may be taking horses into the homes of people.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
It is. It's a bit of a challenge, but it's. We actually had volunteers that came in and did some of the activities without any facilitation or any, they just did the activity and we recorded it. And then we have a session through Zoom where there's a general discussion that starts the activity. Then we show the video, and then afterwards we do the facilitation, because experientially, that's the key, right? The more people can experience something, create a good feeling behind it, the more likely they are to remember it. That's why the horse activities work so well. There's a combination of not only just, seeing, listening, talking, but actually experience and feeling something, creating the vibration that they'll remember. And so the activities that they'll do, it sticks to them. We'll get calls sometimes a couple of years later, and they'll tell us that, that horse, and I'll never forget. And here, they all of a sudden it's like something clicks. It may not be. Obviously they always have clicks, and ahas when they're in the arena, but it continues to grow on them as time goes by. And they go, oh, that's what that horse was trying to tell me.
Oh, I love that. So Gina, how can my audience connect with you?
Yeah, so go right to the website, www.yarcort.com. That's YARCORT. And let me just say, Patty, that the prefix and the suffix of Yarcort, that's a made-up name between my husband's name and my name, means to transition from one place to another. So I thought that was really cool.
Oh, I love that. That's really good. So, and I love that you came bearing gifts too. So I think that's really good. And so you have some type of a business assessment for my audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Patty, I love helping people. And we do something that's called a business assessment or discovery call. It's not a sales call. We want to be able to bring you value and be able to help you wherever you're at. And so if you have anyone in your audience that's been stressed and having some challenges with work-life balance, want some help in the sales industry, then by all means, if we can offer them the link, they can go there, book a call, and they get to spend about 45 minutes on the phone just, getting out of their head what they need to, and so that they can have clarity, and then we can create an action plan for them to move forward.
Perfect. I love that. And this is the portion of our show where I like to call #OpenMic. And this is where I want to ask you, what is your number one marketing, media, or money strategy?
Always deliver value over time and energy.
I love that. That is so true. I think sometimes people get that confused, but really value is the most important thing. I always like to say the only function that price serves is to set the expectation of value. I think it is really, really important. So that is a great strategy. And thank you so much, Gina. Thank you so much for coming today. This was just a great conversation. And I really love the way you think. And I would have never thought that you could have done some of those things really with a horse. Like, who knew, right? So I really love that. And I love that that is really so experiential for sure. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Patty. It's been a pleasure.
So everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. And please make sure to join us on Facebook at the Marketing, Media, Money Magazine, Podcast, and Events Facebook group. Until we talk again, make it a phenomenal day. And remember, if your day is not phenomenal, you have the power to change it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.